our Human Relations course. This is Chapter 2, How to Be Your Best Self. So something that could mean a lot of different things, but in this chapter, the authors have narrowed it down to a few important building blocks, and we will start with emotional intelligence, EQ. Daniel Goleman, who is the person who did most of the early work, the substantial work on emotional intelligence, said, once you are in the field, emotional intelligence emerges as a much stronger predictor of who will be most successful, because it is how we handle ourselves in our relationships that determines how well we do once we are in a given job. So, what is emotional intelligence? It is a form of social intelligence that involves our ability to monitor our own feelings as well as those of other people, and to discriminate among them, knowing what is anger, what is frustration, what is anxiety, etc. And then using this information to inform our thinking and to make sure our actions are appropriate in different situations. And as I mentioned earlier, Daniel Goleman is really the person who has done most of the work, even though John Mayer and Peter Salovey did some of the early work on this. Emotional intelligence is also different. We can discriminate it from intelligence in the cognitive ability notion, right? So we have talked about IQ, intelligence quotient, for decades now, and that is the cognitive ability, the ability of our brain. And we know that IQ is more stable over lifetime. You can influence it in your childhood and in your youth, and then it becomes a little bit more stable, even though we know there is plasticity to it, that you can, over the course of your life, actually make sure you keep your IQ by learning new things and doing new things. But emotional intelligence, on the other hand, can truly be learned across a lifetime, and you can truly take on new skills and behaviors to become more emotionally intelligent. And so that's why we are here. Now that we've studied emotional intelligence for a while, we know that intelligence, cognitive ability, IQ, is not sufficient to be successful. In fact, people with high levels of IQ rarely are the most successful people in companies unless they are also high in emotional intelligence. We know from research that emotional intelligence makes up 58% of job requirements, meaning most of your job, you have to be high in emotional intelligence. It is the single biggest predictor of performance in the workplace. The one thing that drives performance the most. It is the strongest driver of leadership and personal excellence. And we also know that 90% of high performers, that those who are evaluated as high performers in the workplace, also score high in emotional intelligence. So essentially, you don't have to be high in EQ to be a high performer. But statistically, if you're not high in EQ, it's going to be much more difficult for you to be seen as a high performer and to deliver as a high performer in the workplace. Interestingly, research has also shown a link between emotional intelligence and money, salary. And they show that for every point increase in EQ, there is a $1,300 per year increase in salary. How about that? There are 4 components of EQ: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So number 1, self-awareness. This is our own ability to understand how we feel from moment to moment. How do you feel right now? 2, self-management. This is our ability to manage our emotions. And of course, it depends on our self-awareness. First, we need to know what we're feeling, and then we can manage it. So for me, I drink a lot of coffee in the morning. Coffee increases my levels of anxiety. And sometimes I can just feel that in my gut, like I feel super anxious, and I can notice it in the moment, and I know I need to stop my coffee drinking, I need to go get a glass of water. That's a very benign example. 3, social awareness. Our ability to understand social cues that may be affecting people around us, meaning, can we understand how other people feel, even though we don't feel that same way? That is social awareness. Similar to empathy, right, that we've talked about earlier. And then the last one is relationship management. This is our ability to communicate clearly, to maintain good relationships with other people, to work well with them in groups and teams, and also to manage conflict if it arises, when it arises. So 4 components for EQ. One study relevant to us here, it was done in a university, and they found that students who had higher levels of emotional intelligence also had higher levels of self-efficacy, meaning we believe in ourselves to a greater extent, which allowed them to handle problems better. So higher EQ was found to result in better problem solving. So this slide talks about how we can get better at emotional intelligence, and it deals with the 4 components. So the first one, how do you increase self-awareness? Well, you can just spend time pausing in a moment, recognizing the feeling you have inside you, think about your feeling. Are there certain things you react to? Why do you react to them that way? By paying attention to our feelings, by paying attention to our reactions, we can start looking for patterns. And these patterns help us identify triggers, which now allows us to handle these situations in a much better way. So when that trigger rolls around, you know your reaction is about to come, and now you can do something about it. Which brings us to number 2, self-management. How do we self-manage? Well, we learn about ourselves, we learn about our triggers, we focus on the positive. Even things in the moment, like taking a deep breath, helps because you get more oxygen into your body, it increases blood flow, and it helps us actually handle challenging situations. Simple things like counting to 10, because it helps you slow down, helps you pause before you actually react. So we are calming down, and now we can think about how to approach the situation instead of just reacting immediately. Social awareness is number 3. Pay attention to other people, observe other people. How do they behave and how do they react is one way to learn about our social awareness. And also things like being present in the moment, putting away all your screens and literally being, that's my computer telling us it's 11 o'clock. Being present in the moment, because we are now in tuned to the other person. We are listening, we are asking follow-up questions, and we are being there to understand them. 4 is relationship management. Relationship management. Be open, acknowledge feelings, showing that you care for other people, accept their feedback for you and grow from it. Don't become defensive. Don't tell them why you did a certain thing. Just say, thank you. I will work on that to be better. Because it doesn't really matter what you think. If they don't see you that way, it's not true, right? Perception is reality. So, self-talk is one self-management tool. Our self-talk refers to the thoughts that we have about ourselves and the situations we're in moment to moment. And making sure that self-talk is positive helps with our self-management, because we have more than 50,000 thoughts a day, and we don't initiate those thoughts. They just come to us because we have input information into our brains continuously. And so managing these thoughts become really important then. So we need to recognize when we have negative thoughts, and we can change them into the positive. So table 2.1 from the textbook gives some examples of this. So for instance, a negative self-talk might sound like, I am an idiot. And something that you can say instead of that would be, I need to work on these skills a little bit more. You can also do something like, they will never accept me, and change that into, it may take a bit more effort to show them what I have to offer and who I am. Go from, I just don't have the knowledge required for this job, to, let me see what seminars and training and reading I can make available to me and learn from. Change your negative self-talk into positive, reframe. The next couple of slides, 2-3 slides, tell us what areas of our life are influenced by our level of emotional intelligence. And I'm not going to go deep into these because that's what this human relations course is about. So over the course of the semester, we will discuss these in more detail. But our self-awareness impacts how we learn, how we manage our time. It impacts our self-esteem and our motivations. It impacts how we actually manage our stress levels and the things that stress us, and how we set goals, goal setting. Wow, all those things super important, right? For the social awareness, this is the awareness of other people, right? So working with diverse people, people that are different from us, working in group settings, understanding how our attitudes and our personality impact them, how we communicate, how we network, what kind of an etiquette we show up with. Are we polite? Are we rude? What kind of communication do you have? Do you have an upbeat voice, or do you say that something is just fine? Pay attention to how you come across with other people. Then we have the management piece of the emotional intelligence, the self-management and the relationship management. So to start with the self-management, reading body language and other non-verbal cues of yourself as well, right? How do you handle change? How do you motivate yourself? How can you be an effective leader? How do you make ethical choices? And how do you again communicate with other people? And for relationship management, a lot of these things come back, right? Communication, conflict, working with others, even other organizations such as unions. So having this emotional piece, right, if you think about it, you have your brain, that's your cognitive ability, that's your IQ, and you have your emotions, that's your emotional intelligence. These two are your foundational abilities to be successful. And from research, we know now that the emotional intelligence is what we need to be successful. Super foundational. Here are a couple of short assessments that you can take to see what your emotional intelligence is. You can just Google, there are free tests online, and some suggestions for what to do in addition to what we already talked about, in case you don't see the scores you would like to. So things like reflecting on your emotions, asking people around you what they think about your emotional intelligence level. Be more observant of yourself, your emotions, other people. Pause before you say something. Pause before you do something. Putting yourself in other people's shoes. And as I already mentioned, when you get feedback from other people, don't be defensive, but say, how can I use this to become better? So in summary, emotional intelligence is different from IQ. It can help us predict our career success, and it can also be improved over time. Intelligence, regular cognitive ability, tends to be more stable over time in comparison. Emotional intelligence also has these 4 main components that I've mentioned several times today. Self-awareness is the first one, and it comprises the ability to understand our own emotions and our reactions to those emotions. Self-management is the ability to manage our reactions and our emotions. Social awareness is our ability to read body language and social cues to develop positive relationships professionally and personally. And then relationship management requires all these three mentioned EQ skills to actually manage their relationships. This skill allows us to handle conflict and have a good relationship with other people. Emotional intelligence is important because most successful people have both appropriate level of IQ as well as EQ. With that, I'm going to close out and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you. Bye.